With winter coming soon, I've been wearing more wool, so I built this rack to help dry it all after washing. Hanging clothes to air dry is a great way to save energy. It also reduces wear and tear and shrinkage. The rack is just over a meter wide and 1.7 meters long to provide plenty of hanging space. But it also collapses for easy storage between laundry days. Keep watching to learn how you can build this rack yourself with common tools in a few hours. You will need several dowels. I used 16, with each being 13 millimeters in diameter and 122 centimeters long. You will also need several long boards. I started with 6, each 183 centimeters long, 38 millimeters wide, and 19 millimeters thick. I bought all of this wood from a big box store, pre-surfaced because I haven't set up my new shop space yet. The boards came individually packaged, like craft singles. While I'm unwrapping those, some optional supplies we'll get to later are 2 S-hooks, about 1.5 meters of paracord, some wood glue, some painter's tape, and whatever finish you decide to use. Cut the 4 legs first to 141.9 centimeters. This may seem like a strange rounding error of a number, but it's really just the 140 centimeters I want from the foot of the leg to the center of where I'll put the pivot point at the top, plus half the width of the leg, so that the pivot is evenly surrounded by wood on 3 sides. From the remaining boards, cut 4 arms, each 87.8 centimeters. This odd measurement is the 84 centimeters from the pivot point on one end to the bar at the other, plus half the width of the arm on both ends. Drill 2 dowel-sized holes in the middle of the wide face of each leg. One should be 84 centimeters from the bottom, and the other 140 centimeters. If you want to measure from the top end instead, that would be 1.9 centimeters and 57.9 centimeters. Also drill 2 dowel-sized holes in the middle of the wide face of each arm. These should be 1.9 centimeters and 29.9 centimeters from one end. I'm using an easy technique to prevent my drill from splintering wood out of the back side of each piece. Using a spade bit, I first drill far enough through from one side that the point of the bit peeks out the back side. Then I flip the piece over and use that hole to center my drill and finish the hole from that side. When done correctly, this often drops a small wood donut from the heart of the board where the holes met. With these holes drilled, it's a good time to check functionality. Insert a dowel through the middle holes on 2 legs. Insert a second dowel through the middle hole of one arm and the top hole of one leg. Do the same with another arm and the other leg. Finally, insert one more dowel through the top hole of each arm. The arm and leg should be attached to the same side of the opposing leg. This will make the arms sit next to each other at the top pivot point. Just one side should be enough to allow you to open and close the frame carefully. It should fold completely together and open to a point where the arms are parallel to the ground. Now is a good time to talk about why I chose these specific measurements. If you've done the math, you may have noticed that the distance between the pivot points in the arms is half of the distance between the pivot points in the legs. This means that all of the sides of this triangle are the same length. Since all of the sides are the same length, all of the angles are the same size, 60 degrees. This equilateral triangle has a nice look to it and will give good support to the arms. It also makes calculating the height of the triangle simple. It's the square root of 3 times half the length of the side. That also makes it easy to estimate because the square root of 3 is very close to 1.75. This will be useful for planning a piece that will span this gap later in the project. But this geometry also makes it easy to get the height of the rack right because the same triangle exists between the leg and the ground. I know that I want the height to be about 120 centimeters, tall enough to keep long garments off the floor, but low enough to reach over. Dividing by the square root of 3 gives me an L of 69.3. Multiplying L by 2 tells me that the leg should be at least 138.6 centimeters long. That's simple enough, but round numbers would make other decisions easier. What if I rounded the leg up to 140 centimeters? That makes L 70, and it would make my height 121.2 centimeters. That's just 1.2 centimeters over my original target, which is fine by me. 140 centimeters is evenly divisible by 5 to make 28. If I use 28 for the distance between the arm pivots, then double that, 56, will be the distance between the leg pivots. And that leaves 84 from the lower pivot to the floor, giving a nice wide base to prevent tipping. And finally, any piece spanning the middle will need to be about 49 centimeters. That ruled out my offcuts from the legs, which were only 40 centimeters long. Other lengths and angles would have worked as well, but I hope that gave some insight into why I chose these. Let's get back to building. This jig that I've been using with my drill has a couple of benefits. The first is that it helps me drill straight, but the second is that I can set a stop to prevent the drill from going too far when using the blowout prevention technique I described earlier. An additional benefit of that technique is that the half-drilled piece can be used as a template. Line up the half-drilled piece with an undrilled piece, and then poke something sharp, like a nail, through the hole to mark the undrilled piece. Remove the template and drill at the mark. Each arm will have 7 holes drilled through it in total. One new hole goes halfway between the 2 pivot holes drilled earlier, and the other 4 continue down the rest of the arm. The center of each hole should be 14 centimeters from the center of the neighboring hole. It's also a good idea to add one more dowel to each leg, near the bottom, to help keep them parallel. I put mine 14 centimeters up from the bottom. Feel free to make the dowels any length that suits you. By trimming off the end with the price sticker, I arrived at a length of just over 1 meter. 6 dowels need to be cut 2 arm widths, or 3.8 centimeters shorter. One set of arms sits inside the other set, so the non-pivoting dowels in those arms are shorter. I chose to sand and paint before finishing so that I could reach the areas around the pivots more easily without worrying about things sticking together. I gave all faces a light sanding at 150 grit. Then I lightly chamfered the corners to reduce splintering and sharp edges. I used an indoor-outdoor polyurethane enamel. 2 coats was enough to cover evenly. This should be durable enough for slightly damp use. The pegs sticking out of the legs here are the offcuts from the dowels. They're only there temporarily to keep paint out of the holes. Once the paint began to set, I dabbed up the excess and twisted the pegs out. I taped the end of the dowels before painting them to keep paint off the ends where I wanted to put glue. All of the short dowels and 6 of the long dowels should be taped 1 arm width from each end. The remaining 4 dowels should be taped 2 arm widths from each end. These 4 will be the pivot points, so they will be passing through 2 boards on each side. Glue 5 short dowels into 1 arm. Leave the first and third hole in that arm empty. Slip one of the 4 pivot dowels into each of the remaining holes, but do not glue it into place. Apply glue to the matching holes for the short dowels in another arm. Align the dowels to the holes and press the arm into place. Next, slip 2 pivot dowels through the upper holes of one leg. Glue the remaining short dowel into the bottom hole. Add some glue to the middle hole of another leg. Pass that leg under the one with the dowels in it and slip the middle dowel into the hole with the glue. You may find it useful to use offcuts to support the long ends of the upper leg. Glue a dowel into the bottom hole of the bottom leg. Glue 5 dowels into one of the remaining arms, skipping the first and third holes as with the first arm. Add glue to the third hole in the arm, then pass it underneath the top leg and slip the top pivot dowel into the glued hole. Add glue to the top hole of that arm and the top hole of the bottom leg. Then press the pivot dowels that are in the set of arms assembled earlier into those holes. The pivot dowel in the end of the arms goes into the hole in the other arm. The pivot dowel in the third hole goes into the hole in the leg. Apply glue to the bottom hole only of one of the remaining legs. Align that leg with the dowels coming out of the upper leg and press it into place. Then apply glue to all 3 holes of the remaining leg. Align this leg with the dowels coming out of the bottom leg and press it into place. Finally, apply glue to all of the holes in the remaining arm. Align these holes with the remaining loose dowels, including the pivot dowels at the top of the arms and the top of one leg, and press into place. After the glue has had a bit of time to set, stand the rack up and open and close it to test. Mine had a problem. One side of one arm reached the end of its travel before any of the other arms, so the rack didn't close completely. Some quick measurements found the issue. How early did you notice that the middle pivot hole on one of the legs didn't align with the rest? This one was drilled 87 millimeters up from the bottom instead of 84. Since the glue has set, the only way to fix it is to drill out the dowel, drill a new hole in that leg, and glue in a new dowel. If your dowels fit tightly, the glue should hold them just fine. I want mine to be even more secure, so I'm taking the additional step of pinning them in place. I drill a small hole through the arm or leg and the dowel, in each place that I glued. I then glue a pin into that hole. I'm using some bamboo skewers that have been in the back of a kitchen drawer for a few years. I clip them off somewhat close so that I can get multiple pins out of each skewer. I'll go back and clean up the exposed points with a sharp chisel after the glue has dried. I mentioned a piece spanning the middle of the upper triangle earlier. That's needed to prevent weight on the end of the arm from causing the rack to fold up. My offcuts are too short to span this gap, so instead I'm going to use a couple of S-hooks and some paracord. I tied a snell knot around the S-hook, then put the line in place and tied a bunt line hitch around the upper pivot point. That will hold wet laundry. So that's it. We just finished our first laundry day with this rack, and it worked like a charm. We even realized there's an additional benefit to the horizontal arms, which is that after the rungs fill up, you can hang small garments along the side between the rungs. So that was pretty cool. If you decide to build this rack yourself, please let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you changed. Did you use a different material or make it a different size or use a different finish? I'm actually thinking about building another one myself, much smaller, probably out of a nice oak with an oil finish, to use to dry pasta with on the kitchen counter. Please also let me know what you liked and disliked about this video. This is a very new medium for me. I've been much more of a writer than a videographer, so I would love to hear what you think. Speaking of writing, the plans for this rack will be on my blog, which I will link in the video description. I might also try making more videos like this in the future, because that was fun, even though it was a lot of work. So if you would like to hear when I make those new videos, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.